Is thank you. Thank you for WBEI. Catholic Radio, you've helped launch. Who knows what will come from that? Some of those high school students try to figure out how to not to bump into the mic while they're broadcasting. Might end up being a regular for the next decades on Catholic Radio. We do need another generation. Who knows who's listening to that? When I was interested in the Catholic Church, but not certain of it, being an evangelical minister, you have to stay entirely underground with your investigation. There was no Catholic radio that I could listen to, so I pulled into the parking lot of a Catholic bookstore with my sunglasses on, just like the movies, looking in the rearview mirror. I mean, no kidding, because if somebody in my congregation saw me going into a Catholic bookstore, that was it. I was at least done as an evangelical pastor. I walked in and I just asked where the theology section was. I bought the thickest book on Catholic theology they had. I paid and then drove down the road about a mile, pulled over and started reading. And unfortunately found it was a bunch of liberal mush. And I knew enough about the Catholic Church. There's people who are Catholics and there's people who have deviated. Same things happen in Protestant circles. So I trashed that. But how much would I have loved to have turned on to Catholic radio? Do you know how CKI and Catholic Radio in Greer up near Greenville, you know how they find out if the transmitters go out down here in Charleston? There's a group of conservative Lutherans that regularly call and let the staff know that the Catholic signal is out, and they love listening to it. So I would say there's just a huge block of Protestants listening to Catholic radio in South Carolina. When I'm broadcasting, I try to always keep that in mind and talk to them as well, because they are tuning in. So, but more than my thank you and the importance of Catholic radio, perhaps the best communicator of the 20th century in the world and in the church, Pope St. John Paul II said this: radio offers perhaps the closest equivalent today to what Jesus was able to do through large groups with his preaching. And this is a man who's a communicator, okay? And I don't know if you're aware, well, if you fish, you know this, sound travels over water. Jesus gets out in the boat, pulls out a little ways, and has a thing called, a sermon from the lake, basically, using that. He was broadcasting. That was the first attempt at Catholic broadcasting right there. And now Pope John Paul II is saying, this is the closest. But this is your group here. It is not enough to wait for things to happen or to act in a random way. Now is the time for concrete and effective planning of the kind you are undertaking. This special challenge before you is to find ways to ensure that the voice of the Church is not marginalized or silenced in the modern arena of the media. You have a role to play in ensuring that the gospel is not confined to a strictly private world. Jesus Christ must be proclaimed to the world, and therefore the Church must enter the great forum of the media with courage and confidence. That's what you have done, and I commend you. The only thing I would say, keep it up. Seriously. There's going to be other doors that open. Who knows which one of these low-power FMs becomes the dominant FM station down here in Charleston. You never know, and things happen that way. Let's see. I'm supposed to share a little bit about my involvement in Catholic radio. Last week, I celebrated my 22 years on the air on Catholic radio. And in case you have any young people interested in Catholic radio, I'll just share one tip. I was encouraging one of my daughters to start a podcast, and she said, well, but Dad, a lot of my friends have done this, but they run out of stuff in 18 months. And it's rather simple, but a fair amount of work. If you're going to have output, you need input. And you just have both coming and going. And you can last longer than 18 months. Okay, that's just a tip. All right, how I got started in Catholic radio. It all started when I went to jail. In 1989, in Florida, I was one of a group of leaders leading an Operation Rescue sit-in, peaceful sit-in, in front of an abortion clinic. And the idea was to just go sit down in front of the door and no abortions take place that day. And if a woman who is scheduled for an abortion doesn't go through with it on that day, very often she's under a lot of pressure and a lot of stress and has time to reconsider. That baby is never aborted. So in any case, in January of 1990, went to court on January 22nd, the anniversary of Roe versus Wade. And in order to make sure nothing like this would ever happen again in our community, the judge singled out myself and two friends to a jail term in the county road gang to clean out the county's ditches. Well, and they made sure that while we were cleaning the ditches, a reporter from the paper came out and took a colored photograph, put it on the front page of the paper, and there I was. I was the only minister, Reverend Stephen Wood, cleaning out county ditches. And the whole idea was to humiliate us and to make sure this would never happen again. Well, lo and behold, I must also say this was a time of rather great stress that I didn't have much peace about. I should have, but I didn't. On January 1st, I had resigned my pastorate out of a conviction of conscience regarding the indissolubility of marriage. I had been reading the early church fathers. It's something I don't recommend anybody who wants to stay an evangelical pastor do. I was reading early church fathers and saw without any hiccups whatsoever the teaching of Christ regarding marriage and lifelong marriage is rather clear. It was very clear in the fathers. And I came to the point that I saw that I couldn't function as a Protestant minister. I gave my notice in October. My friends who were the elders in the church gave me until January 1st. And I had no idea where my life was going, other than at that point, I had read John Paul II's The Role of the Christian Family in a Modern World, and was rather taken by it, seeing as somebody had the guts to stand up for what Jesus taught and what the early church fathers taught. So at that point, I was open to considering Catholicism, but I had a problem. I knew Catholicism was absolutely wrong when it came to justification and the whole notion of grace. I recently wrote a book on this topic for the 500th anniversary of the Protestant Reformation. But in any case, I figured out that doctrine. So here I was, considering becoming a Catholic, roughly, okay? Had a lot of hurdles. We ended up becoming Catholic in July of 1990. So in any case, we go to jail, we get out, and the owners, or the managers of the Christian radio stations in Southwest Florida all came to me. And what had happened, and what we hoped would happen, it would, so to speak, our going to jail would awaken the conscience of those Christians who were pro-life but doing nothing about it. And they said, we want to put the power of our stations at the disposal of the pro-life movement, and we want you to tell us what to do. Well, at that point, the life chain was starting up, and it was an opportunity to get all these different pro-life groups and different Christians together for an act. And so we had a luncheon. The first time the managers of these Christian radio stations had ever gotten together. Most of them had never even talked to each other. A lot of them, I don't know if you're aware, there's certain groups of Baptists who won't even accept the baptism of a Baptist church down the street. I mean, these are very opposed to each other type of thing. So here we all were together. The miraculous thing that the County Road Gang did for the pro-life movement. So what we decided on is that using the stations to promote a life chain. Well, from that we had, I think, 27,000 Christians spend an hour witnessing for pro-life, lining the highways in Southwest Florida, which was the largest by a long shot, pro-life event we had in Southwest Florida. So then we decided, let's take this statewide. And most of the evangelical stations have a little computer card that brings down the national news at the top of the hour. And I would say, oh, maybe there were 24 stations that had this news coming down at the top of the hour. So we worked for months on this. I would do a call-in on the station as a guest and say, do you feel the pro-life news is getting a fair shake in secular media? And of course, pro-lifers are just, you can't get your message across. And I said, well, there's a way you can do this. And for $300, if you raise $300, your station can get this card. We're going to have a statewide pro-life radio broadcast. And usually within 2 or 3 hours, the money had come in. And so after several months of organizing this, there was one Catholic station in the state at the time. And actually, they were the hardest to get in. And I have to be honest, I thought God was making a mistake. I told my friends I thought they were making a mistake because I was thinking to become a Catholic. Okay? I was an evangelical Presbyterian, and some of these radio station managers probably wondered about my salvation being an evangelical Presbyterian. They find out I'm thinking about becoming a Catholic. I said, this whole thing's going to blow up. And I care more about the Florida pro-life movement than I care about myself. And they said, see, you're the guy for this. You're the guy for this, okay? So in any case, we pulled the 48 radio stations across. It was the largest single broadcast on Christian radio in Florida. We pulled the 48 stations together for an hour-long broadcast, informed them what was going on in our state regarding pro-life, what they could do, and how to participate in the upcoming life change. Okay, and we did a lot of organizational work for several months leading up to this. My office staff, I have 8 kids, paid them all, don't tell, but about between $1 and $2 an hour, and a broken down copier working out in my garage. We ended up with 157,000 people joining us in Florida Life Change. It was by a huge margin, the largest statewide pro-life event ever since Roe versus Wade. We had 2,225 different congregations joining together. We had 290 miles of pro-lifers across Florida highways. Okay, this all transpired while I was thinking becoming a Catholic. So I did become a Catholic, along with my whole family. I was blessed, my whole family came with me, July 1st, 1990. And so I became a Catholic, exceedingly aware that radio is a prime way, in the midst of whatever's going on, even in the midst of rather intense opposition, to get the message out. And so I'd be invited to conferences and stuff like that, and I always try to mention radio. Doug Sherman's one of the guys at one of my conferences. I was talking about the importance of Catholic radio, and he basically spread Catholic radio over the western one-third of the United States. So, any case, hence we launched. Mother Angelica was very gracious to us in helping us getting launched. But Catholic radio has a unique potential, and today it's even more important because I know I do a TV interview for some pro-life thing, and they edit it up to make you look like a jerk, like a fool. You can't get your message across. But we can. In a very winsome way, you can get your message across in Catholic radio. So that's my journey in Catholic radio. But more than that, I want to leave you with something that I regard one of the more important things that I've discovered in the Bible. Okay? I like the Bible. Okay? Since becoming a Catholic, I don't cease to be a Bible thumper. I have 7 more books of the Bible to thump. I'm better now than I wasn't even joking. Here's a critical passage, and try to remember this passage and come back to it. It's from Isaiah chapter 6. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord. Isaiah had a direct experience with God himself. I saw the Lord sitting upon a throne, high and lifted up. Above him the seraphim. And one called to the other and said, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts, and the whole earth is full of his glory. And the foundations of the threshold shook at the voice of him who called, and the house was filled with smoke. Now, Hebrew is a relatively simple language with a limited vocabulary. So, as a result, very often, the Hebrew writers of Scripture will use various techniques to bring emphasis to something. Like when you're reading the Gospel of John and you see Jesus say, truly I say to you, that means really time to listen up. But if he says, truly, truly, and simply repeats it, yes, John was written in Greek, but Jesus was a Hebrew, okay? He's repeating it. That means like, stop everything. Slow down. Clear the mind and heart. Pay attention to this. It's critical. There's one time only, in the entire Bible, where you find an attribute of God repeated 3 times. And it's right here. And it's also, you can find it in Revelation chapter 4, when St. John has the same experience of Isaiah. And you can also find it every time you go to Mass. It's called the Sanctus. It's very interesting. My seminary was owned by a Carmelite order. And it was a boys' school designed to basically result in more vocations for serving the church. And in great frustration, not having a whole lot of results, they put the campus up for sale. To add insult to injury, Billy Graham and company came and bought the campus for training evangelical ministers. And when I got interested in becoming a Catholic, by the way, I did fairly well in seminary. Okay? Here I am, a minister. I didn't have the slightest idea how one got into the Catholic Church. RCIA, that's the Roman CIA. They couldn't say, welcome to the Catholic Church class. So you could understand it. Fortunately, I had a priest friend I had known through pro-life work, and he set up a meeting. I let the bishop know that I was interested in becoming a Catholic and investigating. So he appointed one of his key priests to meet with me. And so the first time in, I didn't take the family in case I wanted to get out quick, quite honest. And so just sitting there, and a little priest, a Protestant minister, chit-chat. He goes, where'd you do your training? I said, well, up in the North Shore in Massachusetts. You probably never heard of it, a place called Gordon Conwell. And he looked at me and smiled and said, I taught there. And he told me about those prayers. And here I was, sitting in front of him. Scott Hahn also went to that seminary. So did Marcus Grodi and Bill Bales, a lot of other evangelicals that are serving the Catholic Church. I just think God got a kind of funny bone and decided to redirect some of those prayers. Okay? But it was interesting. I took, for me, what was one of my critical courses in seminary was called The Spiritual Dynamics of the Christian Life. And I have to have certain dynamics together to make it work. A lot of churches are good, or even parishes are good at 1 or maybe 2. But in the dynamics of spiritual life, I was taught that the key starting point for the spiritual life was right here. Isaiah 6:3. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. It starts with the holiness of God. So here I am, sitting in chapel at seminary, hearing all about Martin Luther and John Calvin, and there are 3 words the Catholics left behind. Sanctus, Sanctus, Sanctus. Up near the ceiling of our seminary chapel. There are only 3 words they left behind. I kept thinking, how did they get that? They're not supposed to be genuine Christians. How did they get that? So here it is. If you want a pilgrimage to take your spiritual life to have the full dynamics that God would intend, start with the holiness of God. A great place to start would just like reading Isaiah, because everything else that comes in the book of Isaiah starts with this. This encounter with God, with the thrice holy God, is where it begins. And some of the other prophets, like Jeremiah, or the minor prophets, and they're only minor because they're short in length, not because they're not potent. And then just going through the Gospels carefully and comparing your life compared to what God calls you to and who He is. Because He is so far superior and different from everything He's made, including us. And so once you get a hold of the holiness of God, this is the reaction. I said, "Woe is me, for I am lost. For I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of a people of unclean lips. And my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts." You see, Isaiah was a good guy. Okay? Like if Isaiah went to the Jerusalem Facebook page and compared himself to his friends on the Jerusalem Facebook, he would say, I'm probably better in my moral life than 90% of the people on my Facebook friends list. Which, by the way, is a deep fog to start comparing yourself like that and how your relation is with God. Here, Isaiah compared himself to the thrice holy God. And this is a good man saying, "Woe is me, I'm undone." And then it says, one of the seraphim took one of the coals from underneath the throne of God and came and touched his mouth and said, "Your guilt is taken away and your sin is forgiven." You see, to love a lot, you start with the holiness of God. You see yourself in comparison to the holiness of God, there's a great distance there. And it's okay. Every now and then, Lent's a great time to do this, by the way, is to recognize that difference. Because as great as that difference is, that's where the love, mercy, and grace of God fills in. If it's just a little, it is a little. If it's great, it's great. And this is where really the Christian life begins. And then God asks the question, "Whom shall I send? Who will go for us?" And Isaiah says, "Here am I. Send me." You see, this is how it all works. It's like a cross. Okay? And the vertical, the holiness of God, our sinfulness, and the grace and mercy and love of God fills that up to the point that you're too full. And it's got to spill over. It's got to go out. It's not like anybody twists your arm to serve God. You've got to, or you're going to pop. And so Isaiah says, "Here am I, send me." So, you all have done a good thing with WBEI. I'm here to try to encourage you just to do these dynamics. And you might get a little tap on the shoulder individually, or a few of you, or all of you as a group. Whatever it is. Serving some youth. Getting together another Catholic radio station. A mercy ministry here in town. Whatever that might be. If you feel the tap on the shoulder, after you're doing your spiritual dynamics, you simply say, "Here am I. Send me." Thanks.
Steve, you had time for a couple of questions and answers?
Sure.
Yeah.
As long as they're easy.
So I'll just start off with,
Okay.
I know I've heard you say that, one of the reasons why you really wanted to create your family ministries was because you felt that the way to get at the pro-life message was really to start in the families. Could you elaborate on that? Am I capturing that correctly?
Yeah, no, you got it, and it wasn't mine. I had no idea what to do with my life after I became a Catholic, because what do you do as an unemployed evangelical minister, okay? Because of my pro-life activities, a businessman called me and said he wanted to have dinner with me, and I met with him. And then he called me again the next morning and said, "I'd like to get together with you again sometime." And I said, "Sure." And he said, "Today." I said, "Okay." So we got together for lunch. And he said, "After you left last night, the Lord laid in my heart that I'm supposed to buy you a ticket to Rome to meet with John Paul II." Now, we weren't doing drugs at dinner, okay? It was 30 days until I even was going to become a Catholic, and this man had me flying to Rome to meet with John Paul II, and he named another pro-life national leader who was supposed to go with me, and lo and behold, about a year later, we were on an airplane to Rome to the first pro-life summit, sponsored by the Pontifical Council for the Family. And I wasn't a national or international pro-life leader, but I figured out I was supposed to be a fly on the wall and listen. And Pope John Paul II said, "God is the author of life. And the reason you have abortion and euthanasia and genetic manipulation and everything else, anti-life, is because the modern world has departed from God. And you can't end one of these things without bringing the modern world back to God." Now, I had done street evangelism, school evangelism, college evangelism, I don't know, all kinds of evangelism. I knew this is like, just bring the world back to God. I'm thinking, but then he followed through. The way to bring the world back to God is through the family, in the sense that the human heart is still open for love. The human heart still desires, no matter if you're a rascal in business and whatever else, you want your marriage to hold together. You want your children to prosper in life. And very interesting, like if I'm flying on a plane, and like, "What are you doing?" "I'm pro-lifer or whatever," and you kind of like, "Can I move over? You know why?" Or I deal with families and marriages and stuff. "Well, tell me more about what you're doing." You see, the heart is still open there. And so really it wasn't my genius, it was John Paul II's. I went back, and very interesting, there's a young couple also at that summit, I think from Eastern Europe, that did the exact same thing. It's a way to bring it back. In fact, I'll elaborate on the dad's end of it. I started going everywhere for Catholic marriage and family conferences. And a little slow upstairs because repeatedly, almost invariably, I was at Catholic family conferences speaking to Catholic wives. Okay? Guys weren't there. So, I figured out, okay, well, there's two things to do. Nothing, or go get them. So 2 years after having enough freaking flyer miles to go to Europe and back, I launched what's called St. Joseph's Covenant Keepers, an outreach to Catholic fathers. And very fruitful, very interesting. I was kind of shocked. I went to books in print, and I figured there'd probably be a dozen books by this title, Christian Fatherhood, and there wasn't a single one in English. What have we forgotten? The largest evangelical family ministry in the United States had an ad for a radio host must be good at communicating to women. What about guys? Because wives tend to like husbands who are following the footsteps of St. Joseph. In fact, I've had wives ask me, when are you going to start a wives kind of equivalent of St. Joseph's Covenant Keepers? And I My reply is, I already have. It takes them about 5 or 10 seconds. They get it. This is the best thing in the world you can do for a Catholic wife or a young woman looking for a really godly Catholic husband. So in any case, we started this, but the interesting thing, if you can connect a Catholic man, who knows he's in mortal sin, who knows he's going to hell, and has reconciled himself with that. But if you can connect him to the fact that if he keeps in that way, there's a very high likelihood that his kids will follow him to the same destination. At that point, it's possible to get a man who hasn't been to confession in 5, 10, or 15 years to go home in a state of grace. It's amazing. And a lot of people think you have to do the kind of Billy Graham type of evangelism or the very complicated apologetics evangelism, and all that has a place and such. But there's nothing stronger than tapping in to a man's fatherhood. Not as an individual, but that he's connected to a family, and his family will likely follow. So that's how that started, and it took off. And some of these guys, in fact, we'd say, and, you know, if you haven't been to confession in over 10 years, just go to the front of the line. Just say, it's been a while for me. We couldn't get enough priests, and we've had confession lines, I don't know, in the hundreds of Catholic men. And for stuff, I don't have to mention all the topics, but we dealt with guy topics, and I know that they're going for a lot of those guy topics. And it was really amazing. And again, I don't take credit for this one. This was John Paul II. He tapped into it. I was just desperate enough to try to find direction in life that I listened to what he said.
A question. I think that was, before you answered that, which was beautiful, I was going to ask if you could give an example or two of a specific story that came from the dads.org site, or even from your show on the radio, where somebody said, hey, I listened to your show and I took this away from it, thank you, because it changed their perspective on whatever. Anything, any couple stories?
Yeah, we've had, oh my, a bunch just really came to mind. Let me try to sort here. We had a cassette tape. This was back when we were first starting. Some of y'all remember cassette tapes, right? And it was just something like, it was two guys about how to keep their marriage together. And somehow, a guy got this, who really needed it, took one look at it and threw it in the trash. And then he decided to pick it out of the trash and listen to it. And we happened to be coming, it was in Tampa, he happened to come to the Tampa Catholic Dads Conference, totally reactivated his Catholic life and everything else. It's just amazing. The northern climates, and I was living in Florida at this time, it was really hard in the body, but they really like the men's conferences in the worst weather, so they aren't hunting and fishing. They're all inside, so there's nothing else to do. Well, you want to get the guys who are least inclined to come. You have to work hard at this. So this was a time we were snowed in Calgary, and there was a guy, we hosted this in a hotel banquet room, kind of like this, and there was this guy pacing out in the hallway who was snowed in, couldn't get out, wanted to get out, kind of nervous and, you know, frustrated. He had to be stuck there, and he goes, well, what are you guys doing? So we told him, come in with us. At the end of that day, he couldn't wait to get home as a Catholic husband and father. It's just amazing what could happen when you tap into this. Other one, actually this was also in Calgary, and Calgary worked so well because there were these massive muscular police officers who were organizing these things, and the guys loved these guys, and they had no polish. It was just all real, and guys like that. And we were out, my host was cooking these cholesterol-laden sausages this long. You have to get extra long hoagie rolls to fit them, and it was literally freezing. He was in short sleeves saying, isn't this great, you know, and all this kind of, yeah, this is wonderful. Can't wait to get back to Florida. Any case, a guy come walking up. just walking up. It's a fellow officer. And he had a couple of bad spots. One where he lost a fellow officer, had died, and something else. He had been down the street and tried to get into a church to pray before he killed himself. And the door was locked. So he didn't know what to do. He walked down the street. There we were. And we invited him in. And he went home, you know, not despairing of life. I'll tell you another Calgary one. There's a football league up there. This is a Calgary football player, and his wife left him. So these guys were smart enough to know that when his wife left him, you don't let him out of your sight. You don't go to the bars looking for a sympathetic ear from another woman and this kind of thing. They basically clustered him. And so I was having these guys on EWTN, my show, and Mother Angelica walked through and said, what's going on here? Because they were in uniform and stuff. So she had him on her live show, but they brought him down with them to EWTN. And Mother Angelica got a hold of him and prayed for him and his marriage, and it's restored. You know? So I'm going to say, it's just incredible privilege to see this type of thing. But it's tapping in kind of the faith and the family dynamics. They're connected in ways that are really deeper than what we really appreciate. And I don't appreciate them all. In a sense, I don't know them all, but I know there's a lot there. It's kind of a big lever. And Jesus said you can move mountains, and he's not talking about geographical rearrangement, but the idea that sometimes hearts can be moved. And again, it's back to St. John Paul II, how a heart can be moved.
Other questions?
Just curious, what were you arrested for before you went to jail?
Well, that was the Operation Rescue. It was the trespassing charge for being at the abortion clinic. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, the jail experience actually was quite interesting in that, again, I was a Protestant minister. Of course, all the inmates knew it. On Sunday, the prisoners set up a pulpit, makeshift pulpit for me to preach. And all the sheriffs peeking around the corner trying to see what was going on. But in any case, it worked out because it's interesting to see what would happen when those radio stations would come together. And you know, Catholic stations, imagine just South Carolina here. Even with all the evangelical stations and the Catholic stations, there was a pro-life initiative, and you got to keep money out of it. Okay, there's not a whole lot of money in the pro-life coffers, so there tends to be a lot of territorial fights. So you keep money out of it, and you keep organizational identity out of it. In other words, you stay kind of invisible in organizing it, not to promote your organization versus some others, but to make all the organizations successful. It works, and it's a rare thing for Christians to work together, but it doesn't hurt every now and then, particularly the cultural situations we're facing. It can do a lot.
May I ask just one last
Sure.
question here, and that is, you know, as a lay person, how would you advise other lay people to respond to God's call in their lives to, you know, be evangelists themselves in their own way, in whatever way they are comfortable or see fit?
I should be able to quote chapter and verse, but I know it's in Sirach. Sirach's in the Old Testament, the Catholic Old Testament, and Protestants don't have it in their Bibles, and Catholics by and large aren't reading Sirach, so it's hanging out there by itself. But in any case, I'm doing a series in Sirach right now on Faith and Family Radio, and it says, before you speak, learn. So you've got a Catechism of the Catholic Church, and if nothing else, read the in brief sections behind each section and get a handle on that. And this is a very Catholic practice, is regularly immersing yourself in scriptures. Okay, the scriptures came to both the Protestant world and the Catholic world through the Catholic Church. Okay, and the Catechism says that in the Holy Scriptures, God who is in heaven comes and speaks to his children. So you, not every day and not every chapter or every verse, but there will be connections that will really give strength to you and that will give you equipment. And then I would dare say, begin where the door opens. I know for me, it was an opportunity for youth ministry that basically nobody wants to do. And I kept pursuing that, and actually my entire adult life, both Protestant and Catholic, stemmed out of that youth ministry. Because what I saw in youth ministry, I recognized that it's not the youth minister. The youth ministers are called mom and dad. And you got to do everything you can to help mom and dad, because they're the youth ministers. And if you help them, those kids will have a great future. And that has actually been my whole adult life. And if I hadn't done the youth ministry, it started with just painting a Sunday school classroom with the junior high youth group that nobody dared to go in there because you came out with a lot of paint on you, okay? But just do it. And the other thing with youth ministry, a lot of people write me and they're like, how do I get on EWTN, you know? Well, the two best that I know of is youth ministry and prison ministry. Because if you're talking to cons, if you don't look them right in the eye, you look away or you look at your notes, they don't trust you. So you got to get used to, you know, right to the mind and heart. And then youth, they're not like adults. You are very polite, nice audience, but you'd be nice and polite no matter what I said, because you're nice. Teenagers aren't like that. You'll know it within about 3 minutes whether or not you're hitting it. And so it's not only, you know, you have to really work in your mind to what you want to say, but then you have to kind of translate it into their life and such. So those are two things that generally go left undone. And if you can communicate to prisoners and to youth, teenagers, EWTN is a piece of cake, okay? But you know, you don't want to definitely start there. You don't want me to tell you how I got on EWTN TV?
Sure.
You may not want me back. I already told them I started radio when I went to jail. All right. Well, there was a certain, I was a new Catholic, okay? I didn't know a lot of the ins and outs, but there's a certain cardinal on the left coast of the United States that saw Christian men's ministry was really taking off. And so we just scheduled a conference in Southern California. And it was out of this cardinal's region, but he was the archdiocese, and he was the metropolitan. And so he wrote us and said, I'm not going to extend my blessing to you. And we said, we're very sorry to hear that. We promised that everything we do, 100% is going to be faithful to the Catholic Church, fill up these men for solid family life and everything else. But we said at the end, we're very sorry you're not extending your blessing, but we're coming. I already done the Operation Rescue stuff, so this was, to me, minor compared to that. And so we came, and he really went at us. He forbade every priest in the whole region to come and hear confessions, to give us any assistance whatsoever, and anything else. And I was a little shocked, honestly. I was a new convert, just trying to help Catholic families, not a whole lot of finances to do it. And John Bekovic had me on for a TV interview, a little 30-minute thing. And the next morning I was eating some scrambled eggs, about ready to jump on the airplane and go home, and somebody tapped my shoulder and said, Mother Angelica would like to see you. Okay. So I went, she was in her cell, you know, the convent cell. And she says, why, I hear you're having a little trouble with our friend in California, because this was the time she was going through it with the same prelate. And I said, yes, Mother. And so she wagged her finger at me. She says, you keep that pedal to the metal and you reach those Catholic fathers. I says, yes, Mother, I will. And then she handed me her card, and she hand wrote her personal cell phone. I says, now, honey, if you have any trouble, you call me. Okay. So I was still living in Florida at the time, flew back, had lunch with my family, went into the office at 1 o'clock. My secretary said, the program director of EWTN just called. They want you to do a TV show on Christian fatherhood. I wonder how that arose.